us here. Let's pray together. God of justice and compassion, you open your hands and satisfy every living creature. Open our hearts to those who worry about feeding their families. Help us to open our minds and hands to feed them. Amen. All right. I also want to share, as we start today's session, when we started back in February 15th, we talked about maybe one of the things that we would want to come out of this is if there would be people interested in facilitating another session. And I'm taking that off the table because we learned, there's a whole lot to this material. And as we've now worked through it all and actually done it, I want to kind of revamp it, make it a little bit more user-friendly for us here, might do that. So that was one thing that I learned from this session was this is a great resource, but there was way too much and how they, I would do some things differently. I would come up with some different scriptures than they had for us. And so I'm going to work on rewriting it a little bit to make it more applicable here and a little bit more user or leader, for group friendly. But how you all engaged the topics and the conversation have been phenomenal. It's been, I say this not to critique what we've done here, but as the facilitator, I found myself struggling a lot with how things were written. And so we're gonna offer this again, over the next 4 years, we're going to offer versions of this multiple times. And so, whatever we label it as the revamped version of it, I hope you might consider attending it again and seeing again, then, this might be a format that I could help facilitate another group of people using as well. So with that, I want us to dive right in today into a little bit of Bible study, okay? And the passage we're going to look at today is in the Gospel of Luke, the 9th chapter, verses 10 through 17. If you don't yet grab a Bible, I'm going to cheat and use my phone Bible.
What was the chapter in Luke?
Luke
9.
Okay.
10 through 17.
Of course, I can't read the print anyway. Chapter 9. Right?
Chapter 9. All right, Luke 9, 10 through 17. All right. Oh, that's Mary. I thought there was someone else coming. Is there someone who would like to read that for us? Okay.
On their return, the apostles told Jesus all they had done. He took them with him and withdrew privately to a city called Bethsaida. When the crowds found out about it, they followed him, and he welcomed them and spoke to them about the kingdom of God, and healed those who needed to be cured. The day was drawing to a close, and the 12 came to him and said, "Send the crowd away, so that they may go into the surrounding villages and countryside to lodge and get provisions, for we are here in a deserted place." But he said to them, "You give them something to eat." They said, "We have no more than 5 loaves and 2 fish, unless we are to go and buy food for all these people." For there were about 5,000 men, and he said to his disciples, "Make them sit down in groups of about 50 each." They did so and made them all sit down. And taking the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and blessed and broke them and gave them to the disciples to set before the crowd. And all ate and were filled. What was left over was gathered up, 12 baskets of broken pieces.
All right. Holly, Bob dropped off your lunch.
Oh.
So I'm not sure where he dropped it off.
Okay, thank you.
It might be in the refrigerator.
All right, thank you.
Mhm.
Oh, wow.
And Holly, we're in Luke 9,
Okay,
chapter verse
thank you.
10.
Sorry I'm late.
No problem. All right, so my favorite question to ask is, how many of you have heard that story before? Yeah, we've all heard it before, right? It's in all 4 Gospels, you know? And there's multiple stories of situations like this. So it's a pretty familiar passage that we heard Kathy read for us. So when you hear this story, what are the first things that come to your mind about this passage?
Were men the only ones there?
Absolutely not.
Okay, that's what's confusing. 5,000 men, so you don't know how
But
many.
they, for some reason, the man writing the story thought that that was the only people worth counting.
That happened.
Could you imagine a group of 5,000 men? No, there would not be a low.
Well, if you're in their service.
Stag night.
Yeah.
Without food, maybe.
So you're
They
probably
would have perished long before. No. That is incredible. No, that is incredible.
10 to 12,000.
What?
You're probably talking 10 to 12,000, counting
Correct.
women and kids.
So
You
the
know.
number is huge. That's what always surprises me.
Mhm.
The number of people.
The number of people would be huge. Yeah. And they just counted, the men were counted. Yes. In some, I want to say Matthew's and John's, it says that, there were 5,000 men and women and, more women and children with them, something like that. But yeah, so a very, what jumps out at us is a very large number of people, right?
And very little food.
Very little food, and there's a problem. There's a conflict. There's not enough food, right? Okay. What else are things that first come to mind when you hear this passage?
Well, verse number 17,
Mm-hmm.
the leftovers were put into 12 baskets.
Mm-hmm.
Where did that go then? Did it go with the disciples, or where did the leftovers go?
You don't
Food
know.
Maybe it's the birds.
Well, why 12 baskets?
12 disciples.
Because of the 12 tribes? Is that why you would use 12?
Well, okay. So where did the leftovers go? Is a question. We have no idea. Where did the 12 baskets come from? Because that was not listed in the resources at hand in the passage. But suddenly there were 12 baskets.
And why 12?
Why 12? Well, there are numbers that recur throughout the Bible, and you don't need to make that big of a deal about the numbers, especially when you start adding them or multiplying them. But 12 represents, there's 2 main representations of 12 in the Bible, being Jesus called 12 disciples to follow him, and there are 12 tribes of Israel. So a lot of people make up, this represents that there's stuff left over for all of the tribes of Israel, or this shows that each 12 of the disciples,
We don't know.
It also could just be a random number that just happened to fill 12 baskets full of food. Nor do we even know if all the baskets are the same size.
But that's just me, that's,
Right. Yeah, so-
I have to look at the other side.
Right. But I think with that number, we're supposed to say, that's a lot. There was a lot left over. Okay.
But they collected it, so they weren't gonna waste it.
Yeah, that's a great point too that Holly brings up. That I hadn't thought of that they found baskets to They weren't just going to let this waste or go on the ground. Okay.
And it had to have taken hours just to hand it out. You know,
Yeah.
I've been at seminars where there's thousands of people and all the food's prepared and they just have to set it down.
Walk
and it
past
takes-
this table and there's
set
big
it-
boxes of
yeah,
white boxes.
Whatever,
that,
which way, and that still takes an hour.
hours
or
to
more.
get there. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Mhm. Yeah, the logistics of feeding, you know, several thousands of people would be challenging. Yeah. Anything else that when we just first hear or you hear someone say the feeding of the 5,000 come to mind?
Well, the only thing that comes to my mind, of course, I'm always the curmudgeon, I guess, is it's pretty hard to envision in that day and era that you could get 5,000 people together in one place. Where the heck did the 5,000 come from?
And they were all
I mean,
walking probably.
They were all limited, very small cities back then. And if there were any Roman, this was still under Roman rule, if there were any Roman soldiers around and they saw a grouping of 5,000 non-Roman, Jewish, very difficult people to govern, they wouldn't allow that meeting to exist. They'd have broken it up.
well, it says they were in the city, that's it.
So what we know historically, critically there is, could be that there wasn't wasn't 5,000. We can't do that, but however, we can, there is a challenge to your concept there, that this wasn't, this was an activity that the people were somewhat used to doing. Okay, where they were was in a place that people were always traveling. They would make, people were accustomed to traveling to go listen to a speaker or that. There is your dynamic of how could such a group that big gather without attracting attention from the authorities. It probably didn't. If it was, with how big it was, it did catch the attention of the authorities. Why do you think the Pharisees started talking to Jesus to get him to stop doing these things? Because he was drawing Rome's attention to, but the Roman authorities aren't going to go talk to Jesus. They're going to go talk to Herod. They're going to go talk to their representatives and say, get your people in line, or we will. Okay, so there is questions about exactly how many people there were. Was that Fox NFL Sunday?
It wasn't mine.
Deb, what else comes to your mind when you hear this passage?
By Jesus feeding the multitude, he's modeling for the crowd and kind of for us too, that we need to do that.
Okay, absolutely, yeah. All right, so Deb brings up another point, that there's a lot going on here, and there is something Jesus is wanting us to see, especially in the context of hunger, right? And so that's what we want to delve into this a little bit more, into that particular, because we are here because we're looking at the issues of food security or food insecurity, of hunger in our community and throughout the world. And this passage actually has a lot to think about when it comes to this topic.
The
Okay.
disciples had their own plan, send them away, go find their own food, it's time for them to go.
Yeah.
Their
So
plan.
let's break this down to a little bit. So there is a situation has arisen. However big this crowd was, however made up of men and women, it was huge. It was huge. They all came to listen and experience, have an encounter with Jesus. In Luke here, the context is Jesus had just sent the disciples out on their first mission trip as disciples, and he had sent them out with, so they were having their post-mission trip debrief with Jesus, telling them how things were going, and so they're just out walking in the countryside, and apparently the disciples' mission trip was pretty good because people came Look, there's Jesus and his disciples. Let's go here. And Jesus taught them. Jesus healed them, cured them. And the disciples were like, we now have an issue. It's late, right? That's the problem. They recognized there was a problem. It's late, and there is a lot of people. And there was some form of expectation that if you went and encountered a teacher, that they would in some way provide for you, okay? In that time, of hospitality. So the disciples are worried, concerned. The disciples recognized the size of the problem. What else did the disciples know or recognize?
They didn't have the food.
They knew what they had, right?
Yeah.
In this passage, it says, we only have maybe 5 loaves of bread and a couple of fish, and that's for the 13 of us. Wasn't going to be a big feast for the 13. So they recognized the problem. People are going to be hungry. They recognized their resources. And in response to that, they had a solution, right? That Kathy said pretty clearly. You as teacher, Jesus, tell them that we don't have the resources. Tell them we don't have what needs to be met, to meet the need, and send them away so that they can get what they need. All right. Interesting.
If Jesus had done that, then the crowd would have lost faith in him because he couldn't provide.
Possibly. The Gospel of John is going to do an interesting take on this story. If you want to read chapter 5 and 6 of the Gospel of John, because they come back the next day in John and they want more, and Jesus doesn't feed them.
Doesn't?
Yeah, well, he does, but a lot of people leave because of it. But there's a element here maybe of where the walk, in our language, does your walk, do you talk the talk or walk the walk, or does the rubber meet the road? Do you practice what you preach, kind of things. Now there could also have been an element that a lot of the people were like, we're not expecting this, but we're not expecting them to feed us, but here we are.
We didn't know he was gonna preach all day and all.
Right. So, but we hear Jesus's response was, no, you give them something to eat. What does, when you hear that, how does that make you feel? What do you guys think about Jesus's words? Because everything the disciples said is pretty darn logical.
Well, the pragmatic disciples are going, we can't do this. It's impossible. And Jesus is saying, just do it.
Mm-hmm. Feed them.
And so I think what Jesus is saying is maybe just try. And no matter how insurmountable it seems, make the effort.
Mm-hmm. So, Dave, would you hear Jesus say, give them something to eat? You're like, God is just, you've got to put forth the effort. Doesn't matter if you can't achieve it, but you got to try.
I think that's,
Does that kind of summarize what
that's what I'm trying to say.
Okay. Anyone else? Here's something else. Anyone wish Jesus had said something differently? How many of you think maybe 10 years from that moment, most all of the disciples were still alive by that time, how do you think, Jesus said a whole lot of things, but how do you think what do you think the disciples would remember every time they saw people? Think they would remember Jesus's word, give them something to eat? Yeah.
Or anytime they're concerned where their next meal is coming from, worried or, for themselves, much
Mhm.
less for everybody else.
Right.
Or
Or
they go, wait, what did he do
Yeah.
there? Yeah.
like in the book of Acts, when Peter and John are going up to the temple, and there's a paralyzed man asking for food and money, and they're like, "We're broke, but what we have, we give to you." Right? That's a kind of a statement that sticks with a person throughout their lives, or at least I think. Times that I'm like, what should I do? I see a situation and think, what should I do? What comes to mind? Give them something to eat. Right? Okay, so it seems pretty clear that Jesus expects the disciples, expects us to respond to the needs of the people around us in a meaningful manner. Okay. Now, it's also easy for us then to kind of diminish this by saying, well, Jesus knew what he was going to do. It was going to be a miracle, right? So how do you guys think they ended up with 12 baskets of food at the end of it? From a couple of fish and 5 loaves of bread. Do you think it was magically multiplied by Jesus, and miraculously multiplied by Jesus? Or what else could have happened?
People shared what they had.
People shared what they had. Mm-hmm. So like what Dave was saying, I don't know if we have enough, but the disciples, when he heard Jesus saying to the disciples, give them something to eat, it was, give what you have. Because someone else is going to give what they have, right? So that seems most likely. I often, when preaching on this, I often want to say, I want to see the kinds of bread that was left over in that basket. I'm wondering if their 5 all came from the same bakery, and if there was clearly different types of bread, in there in the basket, then we would know for sure that a whole lot of people had some food in their pockets that they passed along. But we don't know that. Would it be any less miraculous for a person who was hungry that day to be passed a loaf of bread that was one of the 5, or from the person 3 rows down? No, if you're hungry, it doesn't matter, right? So, this passage, like I said, can give us a lot of guidelines or encouragement for how we can address food security in our community and throughout the world. So the first thing is that the disciples recognized a problem, right? And a problem that is also important to realize in that wasn't completely the crowd's fault. Okay, they're in a situation and there's a problem. So, what problems do we see? What problems are we aware of in our community, in our world, about food security? What are some of the problems?
Cost of groceries right now.
Okay. And while you're thinking, just think about that, and I'm going to get my paper ready, because we're gonna write these down and keep. You can drop there today. So some of the problem is cost of what, of food security. There's a problem with cost of things.
We have enough food, it's just not distributed equally or fairly.
Distribution. Yeah, there's more than enough food produced to feed every single human being on this planet, but we can't get it to them. What other problems?
Transportation, either getting to the store or getting.
Keeping it edible, so it's fresh enough to eat.
The food, how do we get fresh food to people? Okay. What other, think about, go ahead.
Oh, I was thinking, especially in our area, people have jobs, but they are not, they're seasonal, or their hours are cut in certain times of the year. So I'm thinking of loss of income during,
Living wage.
yeah, living wage or something.
Living wage, underemployment is kind of the,
Underemployment.
is
I
kind
guess
of
that
the,
would be, yeah.
that's the kind of the term for if you have a job, but it's not enough to.
Mhm.
But I'll also put /seasonal. Or like in our area, this winter, I've heard stories of people who their hours were significantly cut because there just wasn't the tourist
Right,
level this winter.
right, that's what I was thinking too, yeah.
Mhm.
You've got, it's part of distribution and perishable, but how about storage? Got to be able to store the place.
Yeah, is there adequate storage for food distribution? Yeah. Okay, but I like to, this is a big issue for, transportation, underemployment goes to cost. What other things, if you think about here in our community, are problems that are causing people to be food insecure?
We have to pay so much for everything else. I guess that's included in cost, but.
Well,
I was
they
thinking
use so
price
much
of
of their
groceries when I
income
said
for
cost.
housing
she
or
was
medicine or.
cost, but let's, the cost of food, cost of
Yeah.
groceries,
The cost of everything else, I think that's included, but that's a separate, yeah.
cost of living.
Cost of living, yeah.
I'll put a /housing, too. It's so expensive. Goodness.
I don't know if this would come in under it, but the best word I can come up with is advertising. The people have to know what's available. Call it knowledge, whatever.
Lack of knowledge.
Yeah.
Let's go with awareness.
Yeah, awareness is as good a word as any.
Of support. I mean, that's a great point because Kathy brought over some resources from the Human Services and about Fork and stuff, and I've never seen. I've been a pastor here for 12 years, and I've never seen a little booklet here about the food resources, food security resources. I've never seen this in this format.
Who puts that out?
From Fork, Oneida County, and Vilas County Social Services. About that.
I think it's better if Fork is organizing it better.
I think so. But that shows that is a problem, okay? I'm an educated person, but now I'm not food insecure, but I'm working with people who are, and I didn't know of all, I wasn't aware. So that can be a huge
But
problem.
under
for
that, the same thing is courthouse is only open Monday through Friday, 8 to 4, or 8 to 5. And if you're working a job during those hours that you would qualify but not, so the
Availability.
availability to get it, depending on how and when you do work too.
Mm-hmm. Availability.
Well, then I think about, just family dysfunction. You might have somebody who doesn't have the skill set to prepare food, or they have addictions or something that's keeping them from feeding their family, even if they have access to food, or potentially have access to food.
Not
Family
having a
dynamics.
balanced meal or something.
Right.
Mm. Good one.
Food is an incredible instrument of control, manipulation, and abuse. Okay? So yeah, family dynamics can be a huge thing that can cause addictions, mental health issues, family dynamics.
Or even time, let's say
um,
somebody's working 2 jobs, it's a single parent.
mhm.
How are they gonna have time to prepare a
Driving through
healthy
Taco
meal?
Bell's pretty fast.
Okay, yeah. Lack of knowledge of food preparation.
Well, his really covered, I was gonna say illness and isolation, but.
Oh, no, that's,
well,
I don't know
yours
about.
kinda covered that.
No, but
was
I
going-
mean,
yeah, that's what I was
It's a
thinking.
different twist on that.
Illness,
Yeah, you were there.
isolation. That can be transportation. We do have a bus, a public transportation bus, but it's one, are there more than one bus? How many?
Yeah,
There's
they
2
will.
buses, it's a small bus and it's a big area.
And you
And they
have,
only-
you have.
They'll only go so far from the intersection of 47 and 51, I think, is their
Yeah.
center. And
Yeah.
They'll go so many miles only
Mhm.
from
And you
there.
do have to pay, I mean.
Yeah. Yeah. Illness, isolation, addiction, education. Let's then think of some of the things that we've learned that the writers of this material have identified as some of the major problems that cause food security. Education. Race and gender. Who is more likely to be food secure? A Caucasian or anybody else?
Anybody else.
No, a Caucasian is more likely to be food secure.
Insecure, I'm sorry.
So it's yeah. If you're white, you are statistically significantly less likely to be food insecure. If you're anything other than white, you are statistically at a much higher risk of being food insecure.
But I would again caution about
Right.
using that as causation.
Well, we're
versus
not saying
correlation.
causes, we're saying problems.
Okay.
Okay? So it's a problem. We don't know why that is, but there's a problem that,
Understood.
non-white people are dealing with food insecurity at a higher rate. Your level of education significantly did that. They also pointed out that food security affects children and elderly more than other ages. That's right. Okay. So now that statistic can be somewhat misleading. So if you have a family of 4 that's food insecure, and that family of 4 is made up of a single mom and 3 kids, there are 3 kids who are food insecure compared to one adult who is food insecure. So there's dynamic in that, but it is so much more, it has so much more of a profound negative effect on the child being food insecure than it does on the adult, even though it has a profound negative impact on the adult. So age is a problem.
When I just saw on the sheet too is homelessness, because if you don't have a place to bring the food to keep it in a fridge or cook it.
Yeah, we'll put that under cost of living and whole.
Okay.
Again, there's lots of
Yeah.
issues of, but I will
Some
put that
headings
in.
under each, yeah.
Yeah. So other problems of food security that we could name for us here.
Maybe it's included there somewhere, but having to choose between paying your rent or buying your medication.
Yeah, we're gonna say cost of living, that's, so that choice of,
Okay.
I gotta pay the rent, as I wanna, I need a place to live. Or it's like, okay, it's October and I'm gonna pay the rent, but I gotta pay the rent between October and April because I'll live in a tent bouncing around to campsites the rest of the year. So yeah, those choices of what am I gonna pay, that's all in that.
Okay.
Mhm.
See, for me, like last week, we talked about that food insecure people are obese or have a problem with obesity too, but so they're, I think it's probably included in here somewhere, but the access to healthy food as opposed to the quick,
With lack of nutrition.
the quick marts,
Junk food.
junk food,
Yeah,
access to junk and fast foods.
Those are the ones that don't perish. They can last for years.
I know,
in
they
the
can
box,
last forever.
I know, it's such a catch. Yeah.
So,
But
yes,
it's like,
there is a
all-
problem that if you are struggling to pay everything else and the cost of healthy groceries, the least processed food, meaning the foods that have the least amount of processing, things going into, tend to be the most expensive in the grocery stores. Your whole, Whole Foods is the name of the store, but your Whole Foods seem to be more expensive. Whereas the highly why in the world is brown rice more expensive than white rice? Because there's a significant amount of processing that goes in to produce white rice than there is brown rice.
All that.
Now, but most of the research I read shows that brown rice is healthier than white rice. But why is it significantly cheaper? Probably because more people want the white rice.
Yeah.
But that's one small example that you can look at of why is it the more processed food is cheaper? Because its quality, its nutritional value is so much less. It is so much less nutritionally dense than your less processed.
And education falls into that too.
Right, and so, quality of food available or affordable. That's why the most food insecure places, counties are also the most obese counties in the country. Is what Sue brought up, or Sarah brought up for us. But there is also knowledge of how to, I thought we talked about that, but lack of knowledge of food preparation. If you don't know what to do with a butternut squash
Well,
that's
even
given to
step back,
you,
Step back, if you
Yeah.
don't even know what to go get to
Right.
have
Right.
in your house, I'm hungry now, where am I gonna go?
right,
Go to McDonald's for
Right.
$10, I'm taken care of, I'll wait till I'm hungry again before I start
and the
thinking
kids are
about
gonna like it.
it. Yeah, and
Okay.
not fight you on it, yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I mean, even before you
But
have to
yeah.
prep it, you gotta plan what you gotta get before, and then the prepping it, is
Yeah.
the next step, yeah.
That's a really good point. I know, like, one of the things we can talk to Lorna about is, someone goes to the food pantry, they get, and, Holly grows a whole lot of fresh vegetables and foods and so on. But yeah, what do you do? with a zucchini, with a butternut squash, that's given to you free? I don't know. So a lot of times they might get it, but they don't know how to use it.
I see that in Amber's
Um,
building, with
Yeah.
all these handicapped people,
Mhm.
they'll get it and they don't know, they'll send it up by Amber because I'm there. She'll get a bag of tomatoes, they don't know what to do with them.
Right,
It's like,
right. Or that thing, I don't have the time to prepare a fresh vegetable for my family. The convenience factors. Deb, you had your hand up.
There's the embarrassment of having to ask.
Embarrassment.
As I said, I think I shared that a couple weeks ago, my daughter has quite a few friends that get the ones from the farmer's market, they get the vouchers. And they just said, would you go, because they don't know, and they're afraid to ask because they feel they'll look stupid if they ask, what is that squash, or what is that lettuce, or what is, what is that?
Mhm.
And so they
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
You would hope that schools would address that.
You know, so many
family
things
and-
are addressed in schools that people
How
forget.
much can you teach in school?
Yeah, but the family and consumer education class.
They do
oh,
cover
kids.
that, but then people
But
don't
it is
apply
not,
it and
it is
remember it
not a
until 5 years
required
later.
class.
Well,
Drops the
Yeah,
bag.
it used to
up
be for
here.
6th grade up here, but
It is at the
is-
middle
Well, in middle school level,
Yeah.
but what are you gonna teach a middle, you can teach middle school, but is it required at the high school level?
Probably not.
Probably not
But
anymore.
it's exposure,
Yeah.
you know, whatever,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, so there's problems, just like the disciples, we have identified a lot of problems that are affecting a large number of people, okay? And just one of the things that I know Lorna will share with us, and I know Fork will be able to share with us too, is we're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of people in our area who go to the Lakeland Pantry. Okay? Just in a month, I think last summer I was there in July, and Lorna said they had served over close to 8,000 people for the year.
And Eagle River has
So-
a pantry too.
Yep, so we're talking 1,000 people at least a month who are taking advantage of that service. And that isn't counting the people who aren't aware, who can't get there, who are too embarrassed, or what have you, for it. So, what else did the disciples know when they saw the problem? They knew what they had, right? Okay, so what do we have? What fish and loaves of bread do we as people, as a community of faith, have? What are some of our available resources?
Fork has been putting lockers or public lockers out with food.
Let's focus on us
Okay,
as a community of faith,
okay,
as an
Oh,
individuals
okay.
getting up who recognize the problem.
okay.
So there are community resources.
Okay,
I will
that's
name
what
it.
you're saying, okay.
Yeah,
And we need to be aware of them so we can tell people where they are
Mhm.
or support them.
community resources.
Yeah, okay. You're saying separate from that.
Well, no, that's part, but yeah,
Okay,
I wanted to focus on us.
Well, we have people power. We have volunteers that could help
Mhm.
in some way, like go work at the food pantry or.
So, we've got people.
People.
I like that, people power.
You could,
If we have people, does that mean we have time?
I was gonna say, time, money, transportation.
when you said Holly donates hers, I know that we have a community garden in Eagle River that I help work at, and they donate every week to the food pantry from that too. So community garden, I know that kind of in our time and giving food, extra food we have. Or of the food we have.
So yeah, we have people, some of those people have time, some of those people have money, some of those people have transportation. What else do we have?
Organizational skills.
some of us.
Well, no, like you said, they bring fruit and vegetables to you, you can educate,
I tried to.
so we can educate.
Study of knowledge.
Yeah.
We can give you
You
tomatoes.
drive them to the pantry and help them get their food back.
Okay.
But you're also teaching them how to use tomatoes or how to
I
use.
tried.
We have knowledge.
So knowledge.
One thing about the Rhinelander Food Pantry, they also give out recipes with a lot of the food.
Yeah.
And that, you know, if they, someone can't read those,
Mhm.
Yeah.
but
Yeah, yeah. We have organizational skills, we have, we have knowledge and skills.
I'm thinking with this generation, I'm sure there's YouTubes out there, if we could know what the YouTubes are, channels for them to figure out how to cook. You know what I'm saying, there could be some resources online that we could share as a
Mhm.
knowledge.
Yeah. I was just watching one little blurb about you mentioned generations, the Gen X, we just have given up, that's my generation. It's like, it's in a handbasket and it's on its way. The next two generations below, mine, so we're talking the 30-somethings and the 20-somethings. There is a marked trend in it because it's in people doing things like raising chickens, doing sourdough bread, doing container gardens in these small, not because I'm just doing this generationally, not because of baby boomers and Gen Xers thinking that's cute or what have you. They're doing it because they can't afford to buy bread if they don't make it themselves. And if they can, and that means we're buying the flour. Maybe and they're starting to even grind their own flour because they can't. There's no way they're working multiple full-time jobs and they can't afford to live if they don't do these things. Okay, so there's a resurgence in some of the skills that, like, I think of I remember my grandma Kelly, who died at 100 and, almost 102. But the first house she remembers as a little girl was an Oklahoma sod house. And, they made everything. There were no grocery stores. There was nothing, and so some of the skills that she, I once preached a sermon where my mom, had 4 young kids, I wasn't born yet, and called up her mom and said they had nothing to eat in the house because they really had, and my mom was like, and my mom tells a story that my grandma goes, "You have flour, don't you? What do you mean you don't have anything to eat?" So for her, it was, if I have that resource, I've got, there's resurgence of these knowledge and skills in some of these younger generations. It's but that's a rabbit hole. What else? What other resources might we have? We've hit some pretty big ones. But is there a different resource that we might have as well?
We have more ways of publicizing.
Communication and public.
Marketing, yeah.
Communication. Marketing. Any other resource? What else? What other resources might we have?
Food drives. Food drives. Down in Boston, once a year they would have fill the bus.
Sure.
And it was a competition between the high school classes, and they would fill the bus, and one of the teachers.
So that might be something we talk a little bit next week of what can we do? Yeah. How can we utilize our resources to do something? Do we have a pantry? How can we support it? We can do a food drive. We can do a matching gift like we're able to do here this month. What's another resource?
Can we look at some of the problems again and see if we have solutions by looking at the problem? It's like storage.
You're gonna get,
Anybody
you're
have
gonna
storage?
get, you're gonna get this all typed out.
Oh,
We're gonna get,
sorry.
yeah.
I'm just saying, like perishable was one of them. Are there any big refrigerators or freezers anybody has available? Or, I know sometimes like when the power goes out, Triggs will say, anybody can bring your stuff in and put it in the freezer, or they've done that in Eagle River.
Oh, that's fantastic, you know.
So is there, I don't know, any storage?
I have to confess, as pastor, there was one a few years ago, we still had all our power lines were above ground, and we were out for, you know, like, for over 48 hours. I brought all our groceries up to and the church had power, so I had that resource to know, I'm gonna go fill up the church refrigerator.
Great.
And I know a few other church members did the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I used to have a wood
Doesn't have
cellar, I don't
keys.
anymore.
But, yeah, you have keys.
But I mean, for that, perishable.
Yeah. I'm gonna put, you know, so some of those, you know, a lot of those, you know, but so we've got a lot of resources that might hit, you know, issues of transportation. You're talking about we might be able to help people with storage. We can help people with knowledge of food preparation. We're talking about our, you know, ability to communicate and publicize. We can help people with awareness. But as you look at these problems, are there other resources that we might have? You know, we might say, we don't have any resources that could help with the cost of groceries or the cost of living.
But you could,
But
if
do we
someone's
have-
child is sick, so they can't go to work and they could lose their job, we could watch the child or, you know.
Yeah,
something
because we
like
have the
that.
resource of time.
Yeah.
What other, you know, but do we have resources that could help something like the issues of what, you know, we might not be able to solve it instantaneously, but how would we go about changing the cost of living issue?
Talking with the government representatives.
Okay,
Yeah,
if you're
maybe
food
not energy
insecure,
assistance.
if you're food insecure, do you think you have time to?
No, the
Mhm.
insecure wouldn't, we would.
Right, so we can have that, you know, because of our, you know, that's a resource, we have to be an advocate, we have the resources to advocate,
Yes.
right? Any other types of resources we might have?
And sometimes the people are the elderly too, not just the young ones with kids and family
Mhm.
and working too, because I know I've helped my mom get on energy assistance and stuff like that, so it still could be some people may have the time because they're retired, but not have the knowledge or transportation
Mhm.
to get to, so part of the advocacy.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who have a lot of time and have lots of different kinds of resources. But they don't want to do anything. Okay? But all of you are here on a Thursday at noon. Why is that?
So you want to connect with and help people.
Why do you want to connect? To connect and help people would mean that you have something.
To be a bit more like Jesus.
All right, you're getting there. How about we have compassion? Empathy. You're able to say, I'm going to look at somebody else's problem and even spend the little bit of time and energy to think about the problem and think about what might be solutions. So many people in our society don't even have that, right? We might sometimes pick on the disciples in the passage we read, saying they didn't have empathy, they didn't have compassion for the crowd, but they did because you know why? They said, we can't meet that problem. And they're going to be hungry. And we have to take care of ourselves at some point too, Jesus. So they even the disciples had it, but we have we also have a resource that we have. Well, what was it that Dave, how Dave said, when Jesus said, give them something to eat? We have encouragement, right? We have a model. We have Jesus saying, no, do it, right? So we're going to say, since we're in church, Jesus, okay? We have Jesus encouraging us, Jesus calling to us, saying, give them what you have, right? Because what did we see in the passage?
That's what he said, give them what you have.
Give them what you have, and what the disciples have, was it enough?
It ended up being, yeah, but it wasn't in their eyes.
Yes and no, but no, when you look at the resources versus the problem, no, what the disciples started with and what the disciples started to give with was not enough, okay? So, but Jesus, this is a huge resource for us to hold on to here, our faith.
But if we take that story literally, we say, how could that be? But I don't think that's how we're supposed to take it. We're supposed to get the message.
Right. The message, in this context, thinking about the part of the message, Deb, is to see that even if we feel or think our resources are limited, if we are not sure how 5 loaves of bread and a couple of fish can feed the people enough, we don't need to know, we still need to be willing to give it, to offer it up. If we don't know what giving of our time will do, we don't know, I don't know really if I give my money. Now, if you do not have the financial resources to give, don't give, okay? But if you have the time resources to give, then give it. You can, I'm not gonna volunteer my kids to drive, but, if you can drive, hey, yeah, I mean, that's a huge resource. What difference does me writing a letter to Tom Tiffany saying, hey, why are you guys voting against the USDA feeding kids at school? Doesn't make it, but if you keep doing it, 12 baskets end up, right?
We also have knowledge, like we
Yeah.
know
Yeah.
what's already.
We've got
awareness.
But what if, we might not think that our knowledge, we might not think our knowledge or skill is meaningful.
We know how to do things.
Right, but if we're willing, are we willing to
We know
share
how to
that?
make things happen, whereas those people that say, I don't know what to do to help, we can involve them.
Right, we know if I just do something, it's better than nothing. I think that's a huge part of what this passage shows for us, and that we need to hold on to as we next week will hear from Lorna, and we will start to say, we'll start early next week. You'll get an email with the list of the problems and some of the resources that we had, and what we're going to ask next week is, what are a couple of concrete things that we could do with our resources that could help some of these problems?
Awareness also be a resource, because now we're aware to look for it, and watch for it. and see
Yeah.
it.
So awareness is,
I was always struck by this passage that even though there was only a little, Jesus gave thanks for it.
great point, Colin. Thankfulness, gratitude. The disciples, that was a good lesson for the disciples too, because they felt we don't have enough. And Jesus said, I'm grateful for what I have, and I know, God, you're going to help us out here.
Other churches and organizations have already done things. We don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. In fact, there's a neat story. Mary was telling me a neat story that there's another church here in town that knew that we do some of the rice meal things, and they called us up to see, and they're doing stuff with helping kids in Haiti get to school, and they thought maybe they could send some of our rice meals. But Mary was able to get them connected with Midwest, and then Midwest might be able to get them some of the rice meals. So that, let's put networking
Yeah, yeah.
in there.
I didn't think of wisdom, quite a few of us have the great silver hairs of wisdom here. That when you put all of us together, we have a lot of wisdom
Mm-hmm.
in this group too, and should provide.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of resources for us to do, to use. So next week, like I said, you'll get a list of these early next week of some of the problems and some of the resources we've identified. But be thinking for next week when we hear from Laura about the food pantry, questions you might want to ask her about food security in our community, what's being done, and also be thinking about we're going to kind of do the same thing with some ideas of what we might do. And we're also going to put names on that list. So someone might be, I'm really interested in transportation. Someone might be, I'm really interested in trying to help people advocate for policy changes locally and at the state level. And we'll try to see if we can't get like-minded people connected with the same kinds of things, okay? But also all of the suggestions and ideas will all go to our mission team that meets monthly, and we'll review those too and see how we could incorporate some of those ideas into our strategic plan for that. So thank you guys all. You guys are a great group. Good session today for that. Have a wonderful day and a blessed, well, I'll see you on St. Patrick's Day, but I wrote the 17th worship and didn't even have it in it through a fleeting mind that it was St. Patrick's Day. So it has no Irishy songs or prayer of St. Patrick's. So have a wonderful St. Patrick's Day. We'll do. All right.
Can I wear my Swansea t-shirt?
Yes, you can.
Patrick? I've